It's Friday.
Work is done. Don't get ahead of yourself.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not? It is Friday, right?
Work just started.
I just started working.
Thank God it's Friday.
Wow. How original.
I've never heard that one before.
What a fine day.
It's almost the weekend.
Let's get it started in here.
It's showtime, baby.
Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone. Welcome in on a Friday morning. The NFL Draft, round one is in the books. No local guys. We thought maybe there'd be, a lineman or two, but nothing. So we may say 3 or 4 local guys drafted today. The first day was all about the quarterbacks, 6 of the first 12 picks, 14 straight offensive players taken to open the draft. That was something. And the Broncos, who just traded for Zach Wilson, the former Cougar and Corner Canyon star, they get him and then add a rookie to the mix, Bo Nix, with the 12th pick. So it seems like a three-way competition in Denver. Throw everybody into the pot and see who can rise to the top, which I think is the exact same logic they're using at BYU. Transfer portal news for the Cougars. McKay Hillstead, former Skyridge High quarterback, went to Utah State as a freshman. He threw for a little over 1,000 yards, 4 starts, 8 appearances, 11 touchdowns to 8 picks. He looked good at times. He was a true freshman, thrown to the wolves and all that kind of stuff. He's not a big kid. He's 5'10". And he got popped. I think it was in the Connecticut game. He got hit really hard. And after that, Blake Anderson, he told us, I don't think he was quite as good a quarterback after that. Now, he's not going to get any taller, but you can get, bigger, stronger, add more muscle, take a little more punishment and all that. And then the other thing is, the Cougars, I don't know where he's going to fit in their quarterback depth chart. Scotty G with a tweet that he thinks he'll be starting by the end of the year. Now, that leaves Scotty G a little wiggle room because Scotty G's a trained media professional. Does he get there on talent? Does he get there because of injuries? I think that when you look at whether it's the NFL or college football, there's a lot of differences between the two games, but I think the one thing that they have in common is that you've got a plan to play 2 quarterbacks. If you're unlucky, you'll have to play 3. If you're lucky, you'll get 1, and you do whatever you can within reason to keep your quarterback healthy. But, man, even Patrick Mahomes is running around, and Tom Brady was standing in the pocket when he got his ACL torn. So, it's a violent game, and everybody's trying to get to the quarterback, so stuff happens. And it happens pretty regularly. Last year in the NFL, 60, I don't know the exact number. I think it was like 61, 62, 63. It was a low 60s, the number of quarterbacks who started. Because there's 32 teams, and I don't think it got to 64, which would have been an average right on the money of 2 per team. But it was really close. A lot of starters. Just injuries add up, and sometimes it's performance, but often it's injury. And sometimes it's both with the New York Jets last year. And so BYU's got to be prepared for that. Now, does McKay Hillstead come in and start? Man, he wasn't there for spring ball. That would surprise me. But he could be second or third on the depth chart, and then an injury or 2 or an injury and some poor play, and Scotty G's right. So we'll see how that plays out, but it's interesting to see McKay Hillstead go there. And A-Rod seems to get the most out of quarterbacks, so we'll see what he can pull off there and how those guys stack up. It's I don't think it was exactly clear coming out of spring ball, and it's only more muddied now. I mean, we can sit here and say he's not going to be the starting quarterback, and he's probably not, but do you want to guarantee it? Because I don't think I want to guarantee that. He does have a lot of time to learn the playbook, and how quickly can he pick it up? And the thing is, you can look like the starting quarterback, but you start throwing picks, you're not the starting quarterback anymore. It defaults to the next guy. Coaches hate turnovers. They hate them, they hate them, they hate them. Some are more vocal about it, looking at you, Kyle Whittingham, but they all hate it. So, yes, McKay can play his way in, but really if he can just play his way close and other guys make mistakes, then he becomes the starter. So we'll see how that all works out. That wasn't the only transfer portal news at BYU. Richie Saunders, who went in the portal, was looking around, went to Kentucky, had people nervous. He went on social media and said he's going to BYU. He's going to be back with the Cougars and the new coach, Kevin Young. So they re-recruited him, and he stays there. I mean, they can't exactly keep the band together, right, because they're going to lose at least a couple of key guys. But that's, It's I think it falls under the old, who is it, Ben Franklin, a penny saved is a penny earned. And I think that's what it is with the transfer portal. I mean, you can lose everybody and go bring people in. Utah State just had a phenomenal year doing that. But it's not really the way to bet. Even Danny Sprinkle, the one-time Aggie coach, said, yeah, to think we're going to repeat that is ludicrous, right? It worked, and it's great that it worked, but you just can't live by that. So holding on to Saunders, that's one more good player as Kevin Young tries to put together a staff and a team while his Phoenix Suns are in the playoffs. So the playoffs look like they're going to end quickly for some teams. Looking at you, Los Angeles Lakers. 10-point first-quarter lead, and the Nuggets got within 4 at the half and then blew the game wide open in the third quarter. Aaron Gordon went off. He had 29. And a lot of layups and a lot of dunks for Gordon. And D'Angelo Russell had 0 points on 0 for 7 shooting, 0 for 6 from 3, only 2 assists, and they lose by 7. So Denver's up 3-0 in that series now. Sixers and the Magic did win at home, so those series are now 2-1. All right, DJ and PK, we got to take a break. When we come back, Blake Anderson talking Aggie football. We got that. And also Merril Hoge talking NFL draft. Now, we had him on late in yesterday's show, but man, is that guy opinionated. And 6 quarterbacks went in the first 12 picks, and Merril Hoge is just horrified. Just horrified. Wait till you hear him talk about the quarterbacks. That's coming up as well. Stay with us. DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone. Spring football's in the rearview mirror. Here is Blake Anderson, Aggie coach, wrapping up his thoughts on Utah State spring football.
First off, appreciate everybody that came out. Man, it was a beautiful day, and with us being as limited as we were, I know we were open about that in the social media. I was concerned folks might not come out. We did as much as we could do safely. You could tell really quickly that we're short on tight ends. We didn't have any tight ends with the ones. We're only down to 1 scholarship back. Razul was gone to a funeral, and so we didn't have him. But I thought everybody did a really good job. I let Coach Cephalo call the offense and get some experience there, and I just really focused on trying to make sure we got out safely and had a good, clean, fun day for the fans, and I think we got that done. So in that sense, today was a success. I think spring was a success as well. We've gotten better, I think, at every position. From this time last year to now, it's a better football team. We're not done by any means, but I feel like we've added value in every room through recruiting. Guys have developed. A lot of guys are playing, better ball than this time last year, and so I feel like it's putting us in a good position going into the summer to continue to grow. Maybe add a few pieces through recruiting, but the focus is going into fall camp, as competitively as we possibly can. And I think we've given ourselves a chance to do that. What do you got?
A lot of guys seem, banged up. It's not a huge number compared to other years, but most of those just kind of banged up. Nothing long-term for any of those guys?
The only long-term injury we're a little worried about, E.J. Fisk ended up having to have a shoulder surgery this past week. That could bleed into the season. Beyond that, everybody that wasn't going today should be fine for summer workouts, should be fine for fall camp, barring anything else. But it was strange, a lot of injuries at one position or the other, and it just made it really, really tough to have what we would consider a safe, normal, live scrimmage. So that's why we made the adjustment.
When you, with a couple of guys departing, are you going to have to be a little bit more active in the transfer portal in the summer than maybe you were planning on?
I think a little bit. I mean, we really only had 3 guys leave that we didn't expect to leave. We did not expect to see McKay leave, and that's the nature of quarterbacks. He wanted to be the starter, and when we named Spence the starter last week, we knew that was going to bring about some conversations. Felt like Coop might choose to leave. He's only got 1 year left. We're going to try to help him find a place to go play and get on the field, and we've been very open about that. I didn't expect McKay to leave. I understand why he did, but we didn't expect Paul Fitzgerald to leave and end up at Utah, and obviously nobody expected Donovan Booth to leave. But under the circumstances and how he was enticed to leave, there was very little we could do. Beyond that, anybody that our fan base sees in the portal are guys that we're trying to help get on the field. They're buried in the depth chart. Our roster is better than it was a year ago. Those are guys that don't want to be 3s or 4s, and every single guy, with the exception of those 3, are guys we're going to actively try to help find homes where they could play at either other Group of 5 schools or maybe even 1AA if need be, or Division II. So in that sense, we kind of prepared for this. We're not going to go crazy. We like our roster. We will try to add some help in a few key positions, but really like the locker room that we have and the group that we're building with right now.
Do you like the spring transfer window?
I like that it's shorter than the one in January. I'll probably strategically be a little different with spring ball this time next year. We'll finish probably at least a week earlier so that we can have a lot of these conversations. There's guys that are in the portal that would have finished spring ball with us, and I understand why they didn't. They need to go start finding a home. I could probably do a better job. It is what it is. It's a messed up system that is broken, and so you just got to figure out how to handle it the best you can. And so in that sense, I like that it's only 2 weeks instead of a month. And so we can at least know going into May what our team does and doesn't look like.
You said you named Spencer the starting quarterback. Kind of what led into that? How did he stand out to eventually earn that job?
We tried to make sure, out of respect for all that Coop's done here since he got here and the career he's had, I wanted to make sure that it was very obvious to everybody that Spence won the job. So they got equal reps with the 1s. They both got limited reps with the 2s. And over the course of 3.5, 4 weeks, the numbers and just the eye test all showed that, Spence's consistency. He turned the ball over 1 time through 13 practices. Completed somewhere around 78-80% of his passes, made good checks, good decisions, and he had to clearly win the job. And as much as I love Coop and as all the things he's done here, you've got a basically 6th, 7th-year-old professional in the room, and it shows, and he's made our team better. That is not a knock at Coop at all. He battled, and it was much closer than you might think, but at the end of the day, I felt like for our team to go into the summer, they needed to know who the clear guy was. It was what was fair for Coop, what was best for our team, so that Cooper could make a good decision, and I think it was a hard decision, but ultimately he wants to play, and he knows, he's going to try to find a place to do that, even if he needs to drop down, and we're going to actively help him try to find that. It was a competition on the field every day, and I think if you ask any of our players, as much as they love Coop, they feel like that Spence obviously earned the job and earned their respect, and he did it in a very classy way.
Coach Anderson, I ask a similar question every spring, but who are some of the guys besides obviously Spencer that really elevated their stock throughout spring camp?
Well, I thought on offense, I thought Grant Page and Robert Briggs had great springs. We already knew what Jalen and some of those other guys could do, but I thought those guys had great springs. I think our offensive line collectively is so much better than we were this time last year. The additions of some of those guys have helped, but just watching the young guys like Teague and Maui, some of those guys, and even like a junior Sia, we're getting good 2-deep work, competitive work in there, and the confidence level is going through the roof. Offensively, I think Bryson has come light years from day one to now. This is a completely different style of offense for him, and you can see today he's getting better and better every week. Defensively, Gabe Iniguez up front, he's the transfer in from New Mexico State, is clearly taken over a leadership role. Sean Dolak has taken over a leadership role. Jordan Vincent, all those guys have stepped in there with both Switz and Ike and really solidified some leadership over there. And I think time will tell who else on defense, but all those guys have made impacts this spring.
On defense, just Coach Dreiling and implementing what he wants to implement. Seemed like when we talked last time, it was coming along, but he wasn't quite implementing everything that he wanted.
Yeah, we took a very slow, kind of a steady process over there. We felt like that was needed, especially with all the transitions we've had. And you go from Ephraim to Joe to now this. 35 new players here in January, so I thought he took a very slow, deliberate approach to install. we're probably not near where they really want to be, but we felt like fundamentals and building relationships was more important. And I do think those things are in a really good place. Now, we got to keep building the pieces, and we're not done recruiting. We need to add some more bodies over there as well, especially up front. And it probably could take at least one guy at each position that could help us this fall, just to create stability and depth on that defense to help us be competitive.
It puts you in a weird situation because you could honestly not name a starter and keep quarterbacks around thinking they had a shot.
Yeah.
You know, obviously it's not fair to those guys, but selfishly you could do something like that.
I just didn't feel like it was fair to Coop especially. I had pretty open conversations with McKay, and I did not think he would leave. I thought he would stay and continue to compete for the number 2 spot in redshirt, but I just wanted to do everything I could to try to be as fair to Coop as I could, and I do think our team needs to know who the leader is going in the summer, and it's clear, who that is, and that gives him the best chance to be the best leader he can be. I could have drug it out. I just didn't think it was the right thing to do, and honestly, we'll figure out how to fill out the room and see where we need to fit pieces in.
So you have to try to go after 2 quarterbacks in the portal?
I don't know that we'll go after 2. We've got a couple really good walk-ons coming in that have both played snaps at the junior college level that I think either one of those guys could be a solid 3 or 4. We're gonna be smart. I love the building and room. I don't want to bring anybody in a kind of speedy, careless way. So if we don't find a guy, we'll make it work like it is. We're going to be deliberate about it. Anything else? Appreciate everybody coming out.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, guys. See y'all soon.
There's Utah State football coach Blake Anderson. When we come back, Merril Hoge is talking draft and a bunch of quarterbacks that he thinks are going to fail. That's next. Stay with us. Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone. First round of the draft is in the books. 6 of the first 12 picks were quarterbacks. The first 14 players were offensive players. No local guys went. We had Merril Hoge on yesterday in the show. Now, obviously, the first round hadn't happened, but it went pretty much as predicted. I mean, J.J. McCarthy went pretty early. The Falcons commit to a quarterback. What? Why did they draft Penix? Okay, never mind. We'll figure that out later. So there were a few mild surprises, but it was largely what we expected. And Merril Hoge thinks a lot of these quarterbacks are overrated. And also his thoughts on Zach Wilson trying to turn things around in Denver. Here's Merril Hoge with PK and I. Former Pittsburgh Steeler, longtime broadcaster. Merril, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. How you guys doing?
Good. I can't really think of you without thinking of Craig Bolerjack. We know Bowler pretty well. He's been in the market forever, and he always spoke very highly of working with you. He said you were wildly entertaining.
Well, that could be taken in a lot of directions. But Bolerjack is, a legend. I love that guy. I started out my career with him with ESPN when we helped launch ESPN 2. So it has been a long time, but he couldn't have been a better guy to start my career off. He taught me a lot, man.
Obviously, the draft is what it's all about, and I love this time of year. I always seem to see the clip of you. I think you were arguing, who was it, with Bayless about Johnny Football, Manzel, and you just had such strong opinion, and they're looking at you, and obviously, in retrospect, you're right. And now here we are. Now, the way the world of the NFL goes today is like if you can throw a 30-yard pass and chew gum, it seems like you'd be a first-round pick. Quarterbacks just go so high and frequently now. And obviously Williams here, we've seen him play at Oklahoma and SC and was dynamic at times. But I don't think your evaluation of him is that high. What is it?
Well, we kind of need to back up a little bit, too, because you are right. The perspective that fans have, unfortunately, their perspective is television. It's highlight reels and television. And TV lies and highlights really lie. The only way that you could, and I'm speaking to myself too, the only way you could truly make a fair evaluation or a evaluation at all is if you study these kids on tape. It's the only way. You mentioned the argument with Skip Bayless. Okay, I would talk football with Skip Bayless anytime they don't even need to. Actually, when I did that thing, the producer goes, "Do you want to know the subject?" I said, "I don't. I don't need to know the subject. If we're talking football, He's going to talk about Johnny Manzel, and he wants to talk about all these people he's talked to about him. I go, well, then that tells me he doesn't know. If he's talking to people about Johnny Manzel, then that means he doesn't know anything about Johnny Manzel, and he's never watched any tape. And just because you have tape doesn't mean you know what you're looking at. But so that's just the only way you can look at a player and have a fair evaluation. And then the hardest part is a kid has played really well in college. He's won a national championship. He's won Heisman Trophy. You know, he was one of the best. And people immediately go, well, that guy now can play in the NFL. When in reality, college is a completely different game. The field is completely different. And most people don't even know that. Now, the length and width are the same, but the hash marks are different. So college, you have wide hash marks. That's why the game is played on the perimeter. When you get to the NFL, they're moved closer together, and the game is played in the middle. And then you have some of the best coaching in the world. You have the best players in the world. The offenses they do in college aren't even remotely close to what they're going to do in the National Football League. And every defense that they saw in college does not exist in the National Football League. I mean, the skeletal framework of it does, but the schemes and the disguising and the execution of it is completely different. So your skill set has to have a certain level or degree that helps you make that transition. So let's just use quarterback, for example. These two things have to be like a woven fiber. They are as one. Like you can't have one without the other. And they are this. And there's different degrees of it too. There's accuracy and there's processing. And those two things have to be in sync. You have to be a really good processor and you have to be accurate. And if you don't have those two things, I mean, one of them will drive you out of the league. And now Caleb Williams, actually accuracy is elite. I love his accuracy. His processing, though, from the pocket, and keep in mind, college pocket is a very clean pocket. You have 4 seconds, sometimes 5 seconds. In the National Football League, in practice, we put a clock on, and after 2.5 seconds, that ball better be gone. And in 2.5 seconds, the pocket's dirty. And there's all kind. I played in that pocket. I lived in that pocket. I made the league by being able to play on third downs as a pass protector and a back that ran routes and could do things on third down. So I've lived in that pocket. I've studied it for 40 years. I know what that environment is all about, and it is a hard environment to transition to. And if you can't do that, you're going to get engulfed, and you're going to get it's going to be overwhelming to you. Now, he doesn't function that well in college from that perspective. In a clean pocket or a dirty pocket, his processing is below average. That'll have to get a lot better. He is elusive. People say, they're comparing to Patrick Mahomes. There's absolutely no comparison. I see nothing. I mean, he's 6'1", Patrick Mahomes is 6'3". Patrick Mahomes went to a playoff team, some of the best coaching in the history of the National Football League. He sat a year, and he had a mentor. Caleb Williams is not going to a playoff team, does not have the best coaching in the history of the National Football League, is going to play and has no mentor. And he has another level of expectation that he is Patrick Mahomes. We missed out on him because we got Mitch Trubisky, and now we got our guy, and they're going to expect playoffs, and they're going to expect championships. And so that's going to be a tough, arduous think-up. So you got to find out where he is mentally. Is he a tough kid? Is he a weak kid? Is he a self-anointed punk, or can he handle the pressure that's coming his way? Like, you have to figure those things out, and all of those things are going to matter in his ability to transition. And there's a lot of things that he does not put on display that he does very well with that. So it's an arduous task. Just because he was great in college, just because he has a Heisman Trophy, irrelevant to playing in the National Football League.
Merril Hoge joining us here on 97.5 The Zone. I want you to expand a little bit on the organization, because having rooted for teams that had questionable organizations, and we can get into Zach Wilson here in a second with the Jets, but a lot of people here when he went who are Zach Wilson fans because he played his high school and college ball in Utah, right? Right. And he goes to New York and that's the wrong organization. Can't we say that about Caleb Williams? I looked it up before he came on. Mike Ditka in the 80s was the last time the Bears went to 3 straight playoff runs. They've had 4 coaches in 11 years. Makes me think they got front office and or ownership issues that are going to sink anybody. Shouldn't people who like Caleb Williams be rooting for him to go somewhere else, even though he's not?
Well, I'm not going to argue with that, because that applies in life. It applies in business. I don't care what your environment is. Look, you're in an environment right now. Let's say they switched everything every year. Management changed, how you went about process, everything changed every year. how comfortable and how good can you be at your craft?
Right.
That is hard. That is very hard. I mean, listen. His name just escaped me. The Ohio State. They just traded him to Chicago.
Justin Fields.
Justin Fields. Jeez. Okay, Justin Fields. When he came out of Ohio State, here was his one real issue. He was raw. Like he had, like all the things I talked about. He had all good signs of it. But the last thing that you needed to do to that kid, just don't put him in an environment where you keep changing the environment. And what they do, they changed 2 head coaches, 3 offensive coordinators. He had a new coach every single year he played. I'm like, you got. I don't care who you are. Shoot, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady wouldn't have been able to be as good as they are by that. I mean, shoot, Peyton Manning had our first offensive coordinator when I got in the league, and that was Tom Moore, one of the Hall of Famer, by the way. He walked him through his entire career for a decade. He established him. I mean, that was a vital component to Peyton Manning being who Peyton Manning was. And without that and that critical ingredient, and that is a gamble too. That is a risk and stuff that you cannot predict that's going to happen. And that does play a role. I'm not going to argue that. Now, where they are today, I mean, the Bears, I played for the Bears. One of my favorite teams. Walter Payton was my favorite player. I played in that city. I know that city. I know the organization. Can they create some consistency? At this point, it looks like, hey, listen, we got the people in place to do that. That's why they did what they did. They got rid of Fields. They're going to bring Caleb, and we're going to be consistent. And we're going to grow. That's their expectation now. Only time will tell if they stay to that.
Just something like after the last game when they lost to rival UCLA and they finished 7-5, he decides that he's not going to speak to the media. So that was his last college game. Does that send up red flags for you?
Well, I said it, man. You got to decide. Is he a self-anointed punk? Is he that? And then that's what the combine to me has great value in. Has no other value other than that. I mean, it's a circus. It's a way to make money now for the National Football League. It's an absolute joke. It tells you nothing about a football player. Some of the drills I see there are the stupidest drills I've seen in the history of football. I know of no position in football that you start laying on your back. I don't know. I've known of no position that there's value in that shows that. I mean, the stupidity that I watch in that. Now, to be able to pull these guys aside and talk to them and have time with them, that's invaluable. And that combine does give you that. So there's value from that perspective. But you can only dig so deep. You can only find so much. Has he weathered anything that he's about to weather? Probably not. So, it's still going to be a gamble. They do a good job of teaching these kids and educating these kids and how to answer questions and how to do things. Listen, if you've done it long enough, you talk to people, you can work through that, you can figure through that, you can get ideas of what you're about to deal with. However, what's about to come down the pike, I mean, nobody knows how anybody's going to handle that because it is not going to be smooth sailing. Caleb Williams comes in and just resurrects the team and makes them a playoff team. Because of the thing I just said, teams win championships. A quarterback is a critical component. I understand all of that. I know the importance of it. Teams win championships. And if you don't have a good football team around you, it's going to be an arduous journey. And that division, too, is emerging as to be one of the best divisions in football. And the Bears are the worst team in that division. Minnesota might rival it a little bit. But those two things, and both those teams are struggling and have arduous journeys ahead of them. So you look at Detroit and Green Bay, they're elite in that NFC. So it's not going to be an easy thing. You're going to see how you handle that. And you got to be able to handle that in a manner of great leadership and toughness. And if he doesn't have that, he will crumble with what's coming his way.
What do you think of Zach Wilson, and will the second act look different than the first? He had a defensive-minded coach in New York. He's got Sean Payton, who comes from New Orleans, and Drew Brees, and has a great rep there. And actually, man, the quarterback numbers for Russell Wilson improved in several key categories in his second year in Denver, his first year with Sean Payton. So is Sean Payton just what the doctor ordered, or is it going to be more struggles for Zach?
Well, there's two parts to that. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, okay, he's got hope because Sean Payton is a great developer and he's a great offensive mindset. He will look at what Zach does and does not do well. So let's create what was Zach's biggest issue coming out of college and going into the National Football League? There was one area of concern, one area. Now, I mean, you might know this. He lived with my son when my son played at BYU. He backed up Bo. I've known Zach. I've studied Zach. There's 5 games Zach lost, both Utah games, Hawaii game, Washington game, Toledo game, and another game, Coastal Carolina, I think it was. In his career, those 5 games, what stood out is that they were pretty close to BYU's talent. So they could create a dirty pocket, and they could make him play like he will have to play in the National Football League. You have to play in a clouded, dirty pocket. You don't get to stand there for 4 and 5 seconds and go through your progressions and throw it to the first guy and say, you know what, I don't want to do that. I'm going to throw it to my third guy. You have that much time. That is not the environment that you live in, okay? You have to play in a dirty pocket. Because I just talked about the 2 things, accuracy and processing. Zach's accurate. His processing was questionable. He playing in a dirty pocket, he was horrendous. That is when you found out what he was about. He made a lot of mistakes, threw picks, did a lot of damaging things. He did not function well under that. Well, he came to the NFL, and that's how they play. And I'll tell you, the best defense, if you ever wanted to know the weakness of a player, you just watch Bill Belichick and how he attacks. Bill Belichick would ratchet up his pressures every time they played Zach Wilson and the Jets. Why? Zach does not play well under pressure in a clouded pocket, in a dirty pocket. Now, he has not done that for some 6 years now, some 7 years. There's a lot of wounds there, and there's nothing that has shown he's gonna get out of that. There's more evidence that he can't play in that environment versus he can. Now, what Sean Payton, I think, will do, he's obviously going to know that. And how can we help him grow out of that? And there is your end, your start and end with Zach Wilson. If he can grow out of that, then he has a chance, and he's with the right guy to do that. But that's an arduous task for him, because you got to know I always say this, that you ruin kids mentally way before you ruin them physically. And Zach Wilson was ruined mentally a couple of years ago, and that's a hard thing to heal and to build back up. His confidence is not what it was when he first came out of this league, so you're going to have to build that back up in him. But he's got the right guy to do it. And if he can build around that and make that better, I do think he has a shot. I still think he has a chance, and he's just the perfect guy.
I'm wondering, Merril, what you think is the best, if you could draw up the best case scenario for a kid coming out of college at the quarterback position to go in the NFL. And I look at, you just spoke of Wilson, and we know what happened. That's already been recorded, how he came right in, and it hasn't worked yet. And then we look at a kid from Utah State, Jordan Love, who was a first-round pick, but a little bit lower, not as much pressure, and he stands around for a few years. And then, much like the guy who he succeeded, Aaron Rodgers, who did the same thing with Brett Favre, those guys, after they sat for like 3 years, I think, and Mahomes was one. And then they hit the ground running. If you draw up a best-case scenario, what is it?
Every player is a little different. So I talked about the skill set that you need to have if you're going to transition. So let's say – now, listen, Jordan Love was – when you think about decision-making, even in accuracy, you're like, oh, my gosh. At Utah State, I was like, the last thing this kid needs to go is in the first round and play. They will tear him apart. He is so flawed that he won't have a chance to fix all the things that he's got. And I don't know if he can fix all of the things. You go back to the playoff game in San Francisco, what did he do? Ultimately, even though he played great all year and got better and better, what did he do at the end of that game? You're second down. You throw the ball across your field, making the most ridiculous throwing choice of the season. On second down? It was second down. First of all, it wasn't fourth down. So you weren't forced to do that.
Right.
And so you go back to his Utah State games, and I studied him coming out. I was like, golly, they blamed the system change. Okay, system change doesn't change your accuracy. You're accurate. I don't care what system you're in. You're accurate. You're accurate. Okay. His decision making was so suspect, but he sat for 3 years. And a credit to him, he worked at his craft. That's what Aaron Rodgers did. Aaron Rodgers come out of Cal. When I watched him, I'm like, oh my gosh, if this kid can't throw a flat route, he can't throw anything. And because they just did a college system, it was just it was just pure college. And to learn this pro system, in fact, in my notes, if I go back and look at the notes I keep, I was like, this kid must sit. Now, I didn't think he would get to go to the Green Bay Packers. I wasn't dreaming. I thought he was going to go to San Francisco. But that ultimately happened for him. So there's a lot of players like that. Okay, there's not many C.J. Strouds and Joe Burrows that their skill set is, it's high enough with the processing and accuracy and pocket presence and arm talent. But as long as they get really good coaching and they're able to be developed and they know how to develop a quarterback, then they got a chance to come in and play right away, which happened to both. And both have had offensive guys that were geared like that. Even though the Houston kid was coming from San Francisco, he's offensive minded. He's played in San Francisco, coached in San Francisco, where they had new guys all the time. So understand, and veterans. So you understand that mixed and that variety. So it's never going to be the same for most. In the end of the day, if you said, okay, you just had to make one decision, yes, I would rather sit a guy. I'd rather sit a guy, and as long as I had a good mentor in play, and a good offensive guy that develops. And then the responsibility falls on the kid. There's ownership there too. Are you going to work at it? Are you going to work at your craft? Are you going to do all the things where you're not getting the reps that you need and you're not playing? Are you still going to do all those things to get you better, the extra things that you need to do? I can't force you to do that. I can't make you do that. That's a player's responsibility. But if you have that mixture, man, you got a chance. You got a chance to really, I think, the best chance to get a guy to be successful in this league from that position.
Merril Hoge joining us. We know about your reservations with Caleb Williams in a draft that's really supposed to be deep in quarterbacks. Is there anybody you're all in on, or is there anybody else you can easily dismiss, even though maybe other people aren't?
Well, first of all, there's no C.J. Stroud in this one. There's no Joe Burrow. Okay, so and all these guys are getting pushed up. Half of them aren't even first rounders. I mean, and that's not the kid's problem. That's the organization's problem. That's the evaluator's problem. Okay. It's the stupidity of the people who are supposed to know how to build a team, because they don't build teams, and that's why a lot of them get fired. Listen, I wouldn't touch Drake May in the first round. There's one guy I would stay away from, the kind of guy that gets you fired, because he is being anointed as, the top 3 pick, where they have compared him to he is the 2 things I talked about, decision making and processing. He is as erratic a player as I've ever seen. And Will Levis, you remember last year went to the second round. He was as bad as I thought I'd seen until I've seen Drake May. Now I could put a highlight reel together on Drake May, and you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, he makes some throws that are more incredible than any of the quarterbacks." But if you look at his body of work, he is erratic, short, intermediate, and vertical. Right, left, clean pocket, dirty pocket, doesn't even matter. He's got elongated throwing motion, feeder, below average. He's a lumbering kind of guy. He's slow twitch, not fast twitch. Daniels out of LSU is probably the most polished, but he is not C.J. Stroud, not even close. So there's nobody that is going to come in and take over the league like C.J. Stroud or Joe Burrow. They don't exist. And all these other guys are getting pushed up. They should be second or third rounders, but they're going to push in the first round, and then they have that expectation of that. And that's the thing that's going to be damaging to them, that expectation of that. I like Bo Nix. I love Bo Nix. I think he's rock solid across the board, but that's it. That's not a first rounder. First rounders, you've heard Troy Aikman, John Elway's, Peyton Manning's. I mean, that's C.J. Stroud's now Joe Burrow's. I mean, that's what you have. That's what every fan and organization is going to expect. And when you can't live up to that, that's when the fallout begins. And it's not the player's fault. It's the organization's fault and the evaluator's fault.
Growing up, when I was a kid, the running backs were just the premier guys, and it was a big deal, and they went high. And now that's changed. And you look at the mock drafts, and it looks like probably before we get through the first half of the first round, we're going to see 3 receivers and maybe a tight end with a kid from Georgia going up there. What are your thoughts as far as what positions deserve to go higher in terms of being drafted as far as the relative importance to a team? You see what I'm getting at?
Sure. Well, yeah. It's relative to what we're talking about right here. Okay, talk about Bo Nix. It's Bo Nix or the kid from Michigan, J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say those guys go in the top 10 that they're projected. I'm going to tell you this right now. I haven't looked at all 200 and some players that are going to be drafted, but I've watched almost a half of them. Okay, I could give you 30 players that are better football players than him that will help my team better than J.J. McCarthy. Better, and those teams need them. Okay. But they're so caught up in, we got to have a quarterback, which that quarterback is only going to do. If he doesn't live up to a C.J. Stroud or a Joe Burrow, you get fired. and it's still about building a team. And so you go back to like, so all these other football players are forgotten about. So running backs, I will tell you this. What's his name from Texas? One of the most, the Atlanta drafted
Robinson
last year, Robinson, B.J. Robinson. I'm telling you this, watching that guy, when I first watched him on tape, I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen this kind of dynamic, lateral, vertical, power, strength, balance, explosive. I'm like, geez, okay. Everybody's going to covet that because he makes your team better, and he is unique in that ability to hand the football to. You're going to take him in the first round. Now, there's nobody that is even close to that this year as a runner. So I get why there's no first rounders in there, but that doesn't mean that position is looked at any less. You win a championship in the National Football League, a Super Bowl, you better have that phase to your game. You still better have that phase to your game. The people that don't are the people that don't win playoff games and don't win Super Bowls. You have to have that as part of your game. The more phases you have, the better you're off, the better you're going to be as an offense and a team. So that player will always be looked at. Now, the transition of the game, it kind of started actually when I got in the league. You know, it went from split backs to I backs. You know, everybody calls us a two-back league now. It's always been a two-back league. There's only been one thing that has changed over 100 years, and that is the formation. You know, if you go back and think about the Steelers when they won Super Bowls, San Francisco when they won Super Bowls, even Dallas before Troy Aikman and Emmitt Smith came in, they always had two backs on the field. Their formation was that they just played in split backs. Then when it went to the I formation, well, you couldn't hand the guy the ball 35 times. When you were in split backs, you know, Franco Harris would get the ball 25 times, Rocky Blau would get it 10. They split it up that way based on the formation, so that's the only thing that changed. It's always been a two-back league. And people that say that, it's like, you obviously forgot, 75 years of this league. So that position is always going to be valued, especially if you're special and you can do unique things, like we just mentioned with B.J. Robinson, and what he could do as a runner. And listen, I think the starting running back makes about $11-12 million. I don't feel I'm not going to be crying. I don't feel bad that you're getting $11 or $12 million. I just don't, and I never will. And if I was a running back, if I was still in the National Football League, I'd have a meeting and go, hey, guys, here's the deal. Okay, look, we got to have perspective. We got to do facts. We got to do the evidence and the reality. This is a business. Everybody is positioned, and they have budgets. They're only going to shift if you're special, and there's going to be a value for us. That value might not be what it was 20 years ago if we'd have stayed in that system, but the money wasn't the same either. When I got the league highest paid player in the National Football League, the best player in the National Football League, the best player in the history of the game, made $1 million, Walter Payton. Okay, would Walter Payton be making $1 million today? No, Walter Payton would be the highest paid running back in the National Football League.
Yeah.
So you got to use the right perspective. These crybabies. I played the position. I understand. So you're crying that you're making $12 million. I can't think of one soul in America other than some other running backs that are making 10, and you're making 12. They'd like to make 12 because they're only making 10. They will feel bad for you. Right. I don't feel bad for you. I don't feel bad for you at all.
The wide receivers in this draft are highly rated, but I wonder if you think they're getting pushed up and overrated. Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors. Who's second and who's third? I've seen that flip-flop. Everyone seems to think Harrison is the guy. I've even seen people say he's guaranteed Hall of Famer. I'm like, wow. You're trying to outdo the last prediction for him. But are these three really that good? Should we be hyped about them? And really, for the fantasy football owners, should they think these guys are going to go right into the league and produce? Because they're all supposed to be top 10 picks, and Harrison will be fourth, apparently.
I would say this, Marvin Harrison, I thought his best year was last year. And most people go, he had a bad year. He didn't play that way. I go, you're right. Okay. I watched him with a good quarterback, and I watched him with a bad quarterback. Okay, and that matters when you look at a kid transitioning, And first of all, you look at how they run routes. Do they identify things? Are there little subtle things that they do to set their route up that they learned in college or from their dad in this case that will really help them transition quicker to the national football, to the NFL. And he showed all of that. In fact, I watched him last year with C.J. Stroud. Then I watched him with a guy who struggle throwing the football, and he's not going to go to that in the NFL. He's going to get a superior thrower to what he had. But I get to see him in both environments. and I loved what I saw in both. I might have loved most about last year because that was a challenge for him, having that drop off. But seeing his willingness to continue to play and not quit and pout, I'm going by what I see in the white lines. I don't know. You could talk about stories in the locker room. I don't know about those things. I mean, are they relevant in the end of the day? If I was a GM, of course they would be. But what I see on tape, there's nothing that would discourage me in the sense that he would not be an impactful player. Okay, let's use Drake May with the Patriots, okay? You got him or Drake May. I would take Marvin Harrison in a heartbeat over Drake May at the third pick. He's a better football player. He's better suited to transition to this league than Drake May. I just made my team better versus the other guy's going to set my organization back. Because there's an example. Now, you go to Malik Neighbors. Is it Neighbors or Nobers or something like that? LSU kid, number 8. Now, I stumbled across him studying other players at the time. I'm watching LSU. I can't remember if it was at Alabama. I can't remember who I was watching. And I'm like, they threw a slant drag route, and this guy, he outran everybody to the sideline and took it up the sideline. And I'm like, the speed and explosiveness and the agility, I was like, oh, my gosh, that's rare. I'm like, who is that kid? And then when I get to the receiver, I'm like, oh, my gosh, that's one of the kids that I need to. So he caught my eye before I even got to the list and started looking at guys. And that guy brings some dynamicness that's rare. So it's going to come down, this is what happens in meetings. I've been in these rooms too with an organization, and you get in these debates. You got 40, 50 people in there. And you got guys go, no, go with Harrison. He's the surefire. Malik, that explosive dynamic that takes us to another level based on who we have. So there's, every team deals with that. And that's why I say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Well, talent is in the eye of the beholder too. And how people see things and view things. I really like both of those guys that are, that you're like, well, geez, we just need some guy. Now, you wouldn't take this guy in the top. Right? What am I saying? Yes, you would. If that's the guy that's going to complete we're missing somebody who's really a dynamic route runner, and we can work in the slot. Shoot, I'll take McConkey. I mean, like, that dude knows how to run a route. Ain't nobody covering him one-on-one. I mean, he's only going to get better, too, when he can work on it, 20 hours a day versus 20 hours a week. So I think there are some exciting guys, the three I mentioned. I love in all different scenarios and different ways and what your team need versus not need, and that's why you would go the direction you go.
Merril, we appreciate the time and all of the opinions. Bowler's right. You are wildly entertaining, and you should just go ahead and take that as a compliment. I realize in retrospect, I guess it wasn't automatically a compliment, but that's how you ought to take it. That was fun. We loved having you on. Thank you.
You guys, thanks so much, man. Have a great day. Tell Craig I said hi, too.
We will. Thank you. When we come back, what is trending? The headlines are next.